Emma, welcome to the Easy Conversations podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm looking forward to our conversation. We've been able to touch offline before, and I really enjoyed your perspective, your passion, and we definitely got into some topics that I think are relevant not only today, but I would argue have been especially important in our existence. But before we get into any of that, I do want to give you an opportunity to share with the listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what's brought you here today.
That's a pretty big question. The work that I do, I'm the founder of the Trauma Matrix, and I help people to really heal their shame, especially particularly women.
Mhm.
So help people to really release that shame, which I've found to be at the root of so many issues that people are experiencing. My
Mhm.
story is that I experienced a lot of shame from childhood, and I thought it was the problem until I started to recognize that my mom is a narcissistic, is a covert, has many of the traits of the covert narcissist, and that
Mhm.
my family is quite enmeshed and dysfunctional and narcissistic. And just realizing that I was the scapegoat and that I had been basically the dumping ground for all the shame. And wasn't actually me that was the problem all my life. It was this shame that I'd been carrying. That's the real problem. And
Yes.
once I started to recognize that and started to actually let go of the shame and the guilt and all this stuff that I've been carrying, I've started been reclaiming my freedom.
Mhm.
And the work now that I do, I work primarily with women, and I help them to really release that shame for people who've been scapegoated, for people, because the shame is really at the heart of so many things: perfectionism, procrastination, addictions. I was on a
Yes.
podcast about bulimia. That's shame as well.
Yes.
There's practically nothing out there that you can't, nothing, no toxic symptoms that you can't trace back to shame. And
Mhm.
what I've realized is that shame is super toxic, and
Yes.
that it's something that's generated by empire, and it's always about control. And we're gaslit in our culture to think that it's good for you when
Mhm.
really we're being forced to swallow poison.
Yes.
And it's even in our language, the English language, you have no shame, Furkan. That's an insult. So you're insulting someone. You're saying you're behaving badly when you say you have no shame. And if you have too much shame, then you're shameful. But if you've too little, you're shameless. So this shame thing is always a tool of control. And we also
Yes.
internalize this and use it against ourselves. And we're told by society that shame is good for you, the hustle culture, you got to work hard, you got to prove yourself. It's all very shaming. And while it may work in the minute that you use it, it might look impressive. It leaves a toxic residue that makes it so not worth it.
Yes. No, I appreciate all of that. And there's so many threads to pick up on based on what I'm hearing from you. So I'll do my best to talk through a lot of the things that I'm hearing. And I think the biggest piece, I do agree with you that shame is at the forefront of so many things. And in fact, you can even argue the need for power or wealth is a form of shame too, right? If I don't feel good about myself, I will feel the need to want to control others and have some sense of power. But again, it's coming from a place of emptiness, and it's a void that you can't fill, as most people who've experienced shame can relate. It becomes the whole concept of what I like to remind people when I'm working with them is the shame spiral. It'll
Yeah.
suck you down, right? So definitely agree with that. There's one thing that you touched on right at the beginning that I want to bring to people's attention because I don't think, at least in my experience, many people realize this, but the covert narcissistic personality as opposed to the overt one, right? So I think most of us can see the grandiosity that people exhibit more so in the overt type of narcissism, but not so much in the covert side where it could show up as, look at me, I'm the victim, poor me. And I don't think people necessarily appreciate that because it's easier to feel bad for the person. And it's not as obvious at times and it's not talked about as much. So I wanted to spend some time emphasizing that and get your thoughts on that. as well, and how does it feel being on the receiving side of it, because it can be exhausting when you're
Oh,
around that.
yeah. Especially if you are the scapegoat within the narcissistic system. And by the way, what I've realized, what you were talking about empires and how it's when governments and people seeking power, absolutely. And these dysfunctional patterns that we see in family systems, the scapegoat, the enabler, the golden child, that fractals outwards. Not only do we internalize that and what I call the inner narcissist, often what's called the inner critic, I see it as a narcissist, but also it fractals outwards. Like you say, people who are seeking power, you have this same structure in dysfunctional families. You see it in
Mhm,
corporations, people being scapegoated, the golden child, the preferred one, and people enabling that abuse. And
mhm,
then up to governments and intergovernment systems, you have the same thing. If we only look at the world right now, you have the top narcissist, which is the United States. You have the golden child, former scapegoat, which is Israel. It's just, and all governments are narcissistic, just some of them are a bit more covert. And even the nice ones, like the Irish government, they're enabling the genocide. They know they don't have, they're not the top dog in the malignant narcissist empire. So they only have limited power, but they are an enabling narcissist. And well, all governments are like that. So narcissism is reinforced everywhere in our culture. And the
mhm,
operating system for this narcissism is shame. And this wasn't invented by the Europeans, because even pre Christian, pre colonial civilizations like the Aztecs and the Incas, for example, they were narcissistic cultures too. Any kind of empires that were triangular that had someone at the top, they're narcissistic in structure. But what you happened is when the Spaniards came along and the English came along, they took over because they were more dominant and more
mhm,
malignant in a lot of ways. So we see this playing out everywhere. Narcissists look to be the top dog. They try to get as much power as they can in order to claim that top spot.
mhm,
So really the problem again is shame, like you said, because without shame, these narcissistic systems cannot operate, cannot run. You cannot have a scapegoat if you refuse to take on the shame. And that is something that is very possible to do. But
mhm,
we collectively and individually have been taught, like I said, that shame is good for you, that shame is healthy. Even people like John Bradshaw and Brene Brown, who talk about shame and studied shame, they talk about this idea of healthy shame, that you need
mhm,
to have a certain amount of shame in order to know that you're not God. That's not shame. You don't need shame for that. That's humility. And often people, when they're defending shame, they conflate shame and guilt, which are two different things. Shame is this idea that I'm bad, and
mhm.
guilt is I've done something bad. So we can definitely argue that guilt can be useful, but the
Yes.
problem is 99.999 times out of 100, when you experience guilt, when you do something wrong, you experience that with a large portion of shame, could be even bigger than the guilt. And that's by design. Our culture encourages that because we're taught that if you do something bad, you should feel bad about it. You need to beat yourself up in order to be better. And people wear shame like a badge of honor. Oh, I did some terrible. I was speaking to someone the other day, and he was saying, I was talking to my therapist and I was talking about shame. And the therapist said, it's a good sign that you experience shame because you've done so many bad things to yourself and others. And I just think that's an extremely toxic point of view that's being spread not only by people out there in the world, but by professional psychotherapists. And this is because they're speaking from inside the shame cage, as I call it. And where shame has been normalized and considered necessary and inherently part of what it is to be human.
Mhm,
And I fundamentally disagree with that. I think you should open the door and step outside and reclaim our shameless, because we don't need shame to be good people. But this is
mhm,
the message that's constantly being pushed at us from every angle.
mhm. Absolutely, yes, and in that example, as you were sharing with the therapist, I think that's just a projection of the self. And to your point, I do agree, there's such a fine line between guilt and shame that it's easy to slip into shame anytime. I mean, I'm aware of it, I'm helping other people navigate their shame at times, and I still struggle with it myself. Anytime I feel like I've fallen short of my own expectations of myself or where I know I need to be at times, I'll beat myself up. And I have to constantly pull myself out of that.
Yeah.
Uh,
And shame is a trance that we're all under. So
yes,
the first thing that's really important, I do have a system to kind of help you get out
yes,
of shame. But the first thing to recognize is to recognize that shame doesn't help you become
mhm,
better. Shame is
yes,
not, even neurologically, it's not effective to change your behavior because, in fact, it prevents you from changing your behavior because shame tells you to shrink and defend yourself. This is why people in cults, for example, who are operating on that same kind of system, when they feel shame, they tend to attack
mhm,
because you're attacking their identity. So
yes,
shame is not useful. It's actually counterproductive when it comes to changing your behavior. So then that's been proven. There have been studies
yeah,
with regards to that. So why shame is pushed at us as some kind of a mechanism to change your behavior or to keep you good. It's absolutely 100% a system of control. And recognizing that shame has no function, that it's never ever beneficial, that it absolutely does not work as a way to change your behavior and make you a better person.
mhm,
And really recognizing all those things really helps you break the trance of shame that we're
yeah,
all walking around in,
for
really.
sure.
And I
Yeah.
do a system, an acronym that I use with people and with myself when I'm working with them to break that shame attack when it comes on. Would you like me to go through that?
I would love to go through that. However, I still want to spend some time framing
Okay.
shame up and giving people a perspective around in terms of how it shows up and maybe even talking about it culturally a little bit more. And I am curious to hear your thoughts because we have touched on these things too, but you touched on addiction and I agree. I think m- shame is the main driver behind addiction and
Yes.
I work in that space so I see it all the
Yes.
time. But I think the one of the things that people don't appreciate as much because the focus is so much on here's shame and here's my escape. And the escape shows up as whatever the behavior may be, whether it's substance use, whether it's alcohol, whether it's pornography, sex, whatever the behavior of choice is. But even if you were to dig deeper below the shame, what I've realized, it's often a result of our relationships. It could be relationships with our parents, our siblings, our significant others, maybe even friends. But ultimately, there is something within that relationship. And because as humans, we're wired for emotional and social connection, we put so much weight on other people's perception of us, which is driving that shame, which is then resulting in some of these behaviors. But I want to get your thoughts on that too, and even talk about the Irish culture. Maybe we'll pause for that for now. But yeah, understanding the role of relationships in shame.
Shame is always relational. So the problem isn't the relationships. The problem is the shame that's utilized by people to keep people under control. And parents are taught to parent, utilize shame. So it's absolutely everywhere. It's the way things are done.
Yeah.
So parents were shamed by their parents. So when a child acts out or does something bad, they're told, "You're a bad boy. You're a bad boy." They're shamed. So yes, it's shame. Shame is the cause. It's not the relationships, it's the shame. The
Mhm.
shame is that, and this is why I think when we talk about dealing with these things, addiction, it's a symptom of shame.
Yes.
Shame is the root cause and the driver. It's both. It's the originator and the driver. Even trauma, if you look at animals, they experience traumas, but 20 years later, they're not still thinking about it. What keeps that going in humans? It's shame. Shame is the toxic root of so many things. If we did not have shame, we wouldn't be holding on to things. We wouldn't be holding on to things like our life depended on it. But
Mhm.
the reason why we internalize shame so deeply is because, and this is what I did as a child, we think that if I shame myself first, then it won't hurt when someone else shames me.
Mhm.
So it becomes a shield as well as a sword. And in doing that, we really damage ourselves. But the cool thing is, we don't need to change our parents or change society in order to liberate ourselves from shame. Because in order for us to experience shame, we need to have that inner critic. It's a narcissist, ticks all the boxes of the narcissist. It's
Mhm.
grandiose, it's shame, that shaming voice. It It believes that it's special. It's worried about, has fantasies. Oh, you could be brilliant. It requires admiration. It's this entitlement. It exploits you. The only real thing, it doesn't exploit other people. It exploits you. It's like a marionette controlling you. It
Mhm.
has no empathy for you, and it's got this envy thing of other people. So this inner critic is actually narcissistic.
Mm.
And we can, without this, we would not experience shame, because if someone comes up to you, I was talking to someone on a podcast a few weeks ago, and they were talking about their aunt when they were younger. They were eating ice cream and they were chubby girls. And this adult, grown adult, went up to them and said, "You shouldn't be eating ice cream.
Mhm.
You'll get fat." And these girls, you know what they did? They could have experienced so much shame. They could have been shamed. They could have dropped their ice cream. They laughed in his face.
Mhm.
That's because they did not have that inner narcissist voice that said, "Oh my God, yeah, you're fat, you're ugly," whatever it is. So, in order to experience shame, we need to have internalized it. If somebody
Mm.
tells you that you've got a big nose, in order for you to experience shame at that, you need to have that voice inside. You need to have the hook. Otherwise, you're just going to think you're crazy, you're insane, and return it back to sender. So, this is real liberation when we reclaim our shameless. And that's what I do. I help people to really reclaim their shameless, because we
Mhm.
need to reclaim this word as well. Because shameless, that's the only word in the English language that ends in LESS. That doesn't mean you're actually free of the thing. When we call someone shameless, they're usually 99 times out of 100, they're operating out of repressed shame. So it's not true to say that they're free of shame.
Mm.
We need to reclaim this word, and we need to get rid of shame, because it's toxic. It's always about control. And really recognizing that is step one in your liberation from shame.
Mhm.
Because when you recognize, oh, that voice is shaming me, you can stop it. You can
Mhm.
stop it. But when someone tries to shame you, project on you, make you the scapegoat for how they're feeling, you can just say, "Thank you for your projection, return it to sender." You don't have to take it in. And you have the ability to do that once
Mhm.
you recognize that what's going on, and you start seeing the game that people are playing, often unconsciously. Let's
Mhm.
be real, but that's still manipulation. Even if
Mhm.
people are manipulating unconsciously, that doesn't excuse the manipulation. So we need to take back our power from this and not be manipulated by shame anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and even the word shameless has, like, a negative connotation to it, right? So, I find that pretty interesting when when someone is calling another person shameless, it's almost not out of as a compliment, it's more has
Oh,
that
it's always
negative.
an insult. Yes, it's a slur. It's a
Yeah,
slur.
yeah.
And shameful, shameless. You have no
Mhm.
shame. So there again, it's reinforced linguistically that you need shame to be a good
Mhm.
person. You need
Yeah.
shame to be a good girl or a good boy. That's
Mhm.
control. That's
Yeah.
control. And once you start recognizing it as such, you don't take it. You just
Mhm.
return it back to sender. You don't take it personally anymore. And
Yes.
that's what I've been able to do. And that's what I teach people to do in my programs.
Mhm. And help me understand, because I didn't make the connection necessarily, and maybe I'm missing something, but the inner critic you said is grandiose. How is that the case? Like, how is the inner critic grandiose or
Well,
exhibiting
it thinks
grandiose?
it's better than you. It's, "Oh my God, I know best." It tells you what to do. It shames you. That inherently is grandiose. When someone is trying to shame you, if I try to shame you, that's grandiose. That's manipulation already. So that's
Mhm.
putting themselves in a position above you where they can shame you. And this is why people do that, because they're carrying so much shame,
Yes.
and you can't digest shame. It's not an emotion that's this is why I talk about shame is not like other emotions. It's not like
Mm.
fear. It's not like anger. Fear and anger, they're both uncomfortable feelings, right? But
Mhm.
fear, there's a tiger there, there's a car that's going to knock me down. I feel fear, I get out of the way, right?
Yes.
Anger, somebody's pushing my boundaries. Stop, get out of my, don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So these have a function. Shame has no such function. Shame makes you shrink. Shame
Mhm.
makes you want to disappear. And shame, it's often defined as this belief that I'm bad, that there's something wrong with me. But actually, shame is a toxic cocktail of a bunch of different emotions. And those thoughts and feelings, I'm bad, are downstream from that. It's self disgust, self loathing, anger turned inwards, fear, resentment. It's a toxic cocktail of all those things. So to
Hmm.
say that it's I'm bad is a simplification, because those thoughts and feelings come downstream from that sensation in the body. And this is why shame hijacks your body like no other emotion, because it's
Hmm.
not a normal emotion. It's a
Yes.
toxic cocktail of a bunch of toxic. It's like Hawking book talks. They're talking about energy. It's like the lowest vibration. Shame is
Hmm.
just one up from death,
Yes.
because that's what it tells you. It tells you that you might as well, without this internalized narcissistic voice, nobody would commit suicide.
Hmm.
I've been suicidal, and it was that voice, that shaming voice. You might as well not be here. No one will miss you if you're gone. In order to do that action, you need to have that. It doesn't matter how bad things are in your life. So this is the root cause again, and it's shame.
Hmm. Absolutely. And to kind of talk about something you and I touched on last time was the whole Irish culture. And I mentioned to you, I've been to Ireland, loved the country, beautiful, amazing people, really loved my time there interacting with the locals. But the one thing I noticed was drinking is such a huge part of the culture. It's embedded everywhere, like every town I went to. So we've talked about addiction, we've talked about the escape aspect of it, we've talked about the underlying shame, but I am curious to understand from your perspective, why is it such a huge part of the culture, and what is going on below the surface there?
Yeah, it's shame. Alcohol puts the mute button on shame temporarily, so it makes you feel a bit more comfortable.
Mm,
And before the the Catholic Church came along, and this is also in Eastern cultures and Arab cultures as well. This I talk about two different shades of shame.
yep.
So there's this individualized shame that we have in the West. So when people in West and therapists in the West talk about shame, they're basically focusing, it's quite Eurocentric really. They
Yes.
focus on the European idea of shame, which is this idea I'm bad because
Mhm,
I'm human. And this, like, the foundation of all our cultures is this kind of idea of original sin. You're
mhm.
bad and you have to forgive. Just think about that. That's a double bind that you can never escape from. But
Yes.
pre Christianity, and that was really created by them again as a means to control people. But when you look at pre Christian cultures, even in Ireland, it was a different kind of shame before. It was more kind of this honor code shame. So, like a tribal shame. I call it collectivist shame.
Mhm,
So, if you step out of what's considered acceptable for the tribe, you're shamed for that. But you're still
mm,
shamed for something that you do rather than who you are. So,
mhm,
I argue that the European idea of shame that was really spread with colonization and the church is is even more virulent and corrosive.
mhm.
But they're both deadly. Don't get me wrong. People
Yep.
always commit suicide because of shame. It's always shame. This is why in Japan they have this collectivist shame. People unalive themselves all the time as a result of that, because shame is the driver and the root cause of this.
Mhm, mhm.
So, yes, there's a huge problem because, that idea before Christianity came to Ireland, women had more elevated roles. It wasn't disgusting the female form. This was all imposed through
Mhm,
Christianity and kept women down. And men were shamed of their or sexuality. So what did they do? They projected it onto women. And this is why women have been collectively scapegoated, not just in the Christian world, but in many places in the Arab world as well. So women have been scapegoated for men's sexuality, which is considered inappropriate. So women are carrying that layer of shame as well. And there's also within Ireland, there's a lot of repressed energy and unprocessed. Only a couple of generations back, we had genocide, famine, all of
yep.
these things. And we're not a culture that talks about these things. We minimize these things. Oh, she's just a bit anxious. Rather than, we don't tend to feel comfortable labeling the problem, we minimize it instead.
Mhm,
And this is why in Ireland, there was such a huge problem with there is a problem with male suicide,
mm,
because we're very repressed in lots of different ways. And that comes from the Catholicism, but also the culture where it hasn't been okay to talk about feelings. And that
mhm.
was certainly my experience in my family. It wasn't okay when I tried to express my feelings. I was told that I was too sensitive, self-absorbed, and that wasn't allowed because that makes people feel uncomfortable and they don't want to
Mhm.
do that. So
Mhm.
again, shaming, manipulation,
Yes.
control. It's unconscious. People aren't sitting back going, "Ooh, let's manipulate them." But the shame is control. It's
Yeah.
manipulation every single time. Doesn't matter
Absolutely.
who's using it. If you have the voice doing it to yourself, that's manipulation. It's
Mhm.
always manipulation with
Yeah.
no exceptions.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on the whole suicide, people dying by suicide, especially in Ireland with men. And I can only speak to in the experience of, as a man, but I see that spreading everywhere, right? Because the suicide rates are fairly high for men all across the world nowadays. And I think part of it is the shame that men internalize around their emotions and not
Yeah,
feeling comfortable speaking about it because at some point they were told or what they internalized or they were socially conditioned in a way that these
yeah.
emotions are not healthy. So bury it alive and basically either show it as anger or don't show it at all. And that's where I think we're seeing a lot of difficulty with so many men trying to find their way. And unfortunately, one of the outcomes is what we've talked about in terms of how they find a solution.
Yeah, and the other, if you've seen that Netflix show, Adolescence, it
Yeah.
really sums it up. And a lot of men were very triggered and felt attacked by that. But it's pointing to a societal problem. It's not just men. The patriarchy is toxic for everyone. This shame based culture that we live in is toxic for everyone. Doesn't matter who you are. Nobody wins from it. It's a lose-lose contest. But this is how our society is structured. So
Mhm.
we need to separate ourselves from this shame-based culture. We need to stop shaming ourselves and stop accepting shame when it's projected on us. And also, we need to work on breaking down these shame-based narcissistic structures
Mhm.
in our society. And that's a
Mhm.
big task because the whole world is built is it's a narcissistic ecosystem.
Mhm.
So this is why shame is unavoidable. Doesn't matter
Mhm.
where you are in the world, even if you're not brought up in a dysfunctional or narcissistic family, or if you weren't scapegoated or from a group that was scapegoated, because this is the other
Mhm.
thing is like right now in the United States, not just in the United States, but across Europe, the current scapegoat of choice collectively is the immigrants. So
Mhm.
we have all this unprocessed shame. What do we do with it? It feels very uncomfortable. I can't digest it. As the top group, the white or whatever it is, whatever it happens to be, who's somebody's fault? We need a scapegoat.
Mhm.
Immigrants, very easy scapegoat. And
Mhm.
this is it's not it's a complicated problem, but
Mhm.
because it's like fractal in nature,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
everywhere. It's multidimensional. But
Mhm.
we do have the power over ourselves to stop shaming ourselves, like I said, and to stop allowing ourselves be shamed by
Mhm.
people who are attempting to free themselves of shame for a moment and project their shame on you. And
Yes.
this is why women pull each other down because women collectively, like I said, we've been scapegoated. So what do we do to feel a little bit better? Oh, look at that. Isn't she so fat? We pull other women down to make ourselves feel less shamed. It
Yeah.
doesn't work in the long term. We feel a little moment of relief for a few seconds, but it's not function. It doesn't work in the long term. So we
Mhm.
got to keep shaming them. And
Yeah.
this is how shame spreads. It's extremely toxic, extremely corrosive, extremely damaging for everyone, including ourselves. And we can't, there is a solution. We can release ourselves of shame. We can free ourselves of shame. And that's something that nobody talks about because, like I said, shame has been so normalized and
Mhm.
it's been like, oh, well, to be human, you need to experience shame. That's completely false.
Mhm.
That's not true. There were cultures that were more nomadic where there was little to no shame. Shame always rears its ugly head when you start creating these hierarchical societies
Mhm.
where somebody needs to be pulling the strings and be in control. But women in more nomadic societies weren't shamed. This is an imposition, particularly by the European concept of shame, because the
Mhm.
Europeans came and they carried all that idea of internalized shame. We're bad. We're better than them. They projected their shame on the whoever the indigenous people happened to be, and this is how they conquered people. This is
Right.
why when I'm like in Ireland, the Catholic, the arrival of the Christians led the way. The minds were colonized before we were physically colonized by the
Mhm.
British.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's powerful. And As you were touching on how women will feel this need to pull each other down, I see that with men too. I have had so many men share with me that are in my age group. They really struggle within their social circles at times because they find some of their friends are still kind of in that high school mentality where making fun of each other or putting each other down is kind of a way of experiencing camaraderie, which to me is almost backward. It's like, why aren't you lifting each other up and supporting each other? Why do you need to put each other down to feel better about yourself? But ultimately, again, as we've discussed so far, it's a product of shame. The other thing
Yes.
I wanted to bring up too was it's interesting because nowadays the other thing I see is the weaponization of the term narcissist. So if I don't feel good about myself, if I feel like I've been wronged or things didn't go my way, it's easy for me to relieve myself of that shame too by just weaponizing that term and calling the other person a narcissist, which again to me is kind of going on the other side of the extreme. But just want to get your thoughts on that because nowadays I feel like the term is just thrown around. It's something I've talked about on this podcast too, but unfortunately, that's been my observation too. Is people are not taking responsibility, but then shifting the blame onto others by
Yeah.
weaponizing the term.
And shame will make you do that.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what narcissists do. But you don't have to take that in. That's their projection. And
yeah,
recognizing it as such, thank you for your projection. You don't have to take it in those girls with the ice cream. You don't even have to acknowledge it. You just walk away and know that's their thing.
yeah.
Like you said, like we talked about earlier, in order to experience shame, you need to have internalized it.
Mhm.
And you can de-internalize shame. It is
Yes.
possible.
Hmm. Yeah, and it can feel like a game sometimes. And when I'm working with people who are finding themselves stuck in that dynamic, the enmeshment, or just the drama triangle for that matter, you can remove yourself. You don't have to participate, and then it's no longer a game. The game only exists if there's participants, right? So you still
Exactly
have
that.
you have
Mhm.
that freedom of choice around not having to
Yes.
participate. So, which is probably a good time to then come back to what you wanted to share around how can people gain awareness and what are the things they can do if they're finding themselves stuck in these dynamics or they feel either they're being shamed by people around them or they're internalizing it themselves.
First of all, recognize that in order to experience shame, you need to have internalized it. So that's taking back your power. Okay, that's number one. You can't, nobody can shame you unless you have internalized what I call this inner narcissist that agrees with in some way. So that voice is, it's like the hook for the shame. Without that hook, it's just, there's nothing. It's like somebody tells you, I hate your purple shirt. It's not purple today. Okay, that's you. You're obviously got a problem with your color coordination, whatever. You don't take that in. The acronym that I have is BREAK, BREAK. So, B, first of all, is really recognize, and we talked about this before, it's recognizing that shame is a trance. It's not
Mhm.
your voice, it's a spell, it's a pattern, it's a trance state that we've all collectively been under. So, really catching it, interrupting it, recognizing, like we talked about before, that it's never ever beneficial. It doesn't make you a better person. Feeling bad and guilty about yourself doesn't help you change your behavior. On the contrary, it keeps you more entrenched and less likely to change.
Mhm.
So recognize this is a trance, and that automatically disrupts the loop instantly. So that's B. Then R, refuse to engage. And this is the thing when we deal with narcissists out there in the world, this is what we've got to do. Dr. Ramani talks about deep, and we've got to do this with the shame voice inside. So don't defend, don't engage, don't explain, and don't personalize. Just say, not today. Not
Mhm.
today, bitch. You don't owe this any courtesy or any politeness, or you could just say, not today. It ain't happening. You don't, but you don't, we're taught by therapists and healers and stuff to send love to this thing. And it's a parasite. It's a parasite. It's not a wounded child. I've been sitting down with my inner critic for my whole life and tried to empathize with it, sending it love, and it's just fed it. You just give it narcissistic supply, basically. So you cut that off. Don't defend, don't engage, don't explain, don't personalize, just not today. Then we go on to E, which is expose the lie, this shame based programming. It's always a lie. Recognize this is control, whether it's saying you're too fat, you're too thin, whatever. That's not empirically true, for example. And this is control. It's not your story. And speaking that truth really starts to disarm its power already. Then you go back to A, which is anchor in truth. Because like I mentioned before, shame, it hijacks your body like nothing else because it's not a normal emotion. It's that lethal cocktail. So come back to your body, feel your breath, plant your feet, say your name, the year, and really remind your nervous system because it is the nervous system that reacts to shame so badly because it's death. Shame is death for your body. It's you cast out, nobody loves you, you become nothing. It's death for your nervous system. That's what it is. Tell your nervous system that you're safe, that you're sovereign, and that you're here. And then K, kick it out. That means physically shake it off, stomp it out. This is not mine. And really evict the spell from your body and mind. But the important thing here is you don't negotiate with a spell. You don't try to fight your way out of a spell. It doesn't work. You just stop giving it power. You stop feeding it your power. Stop giving it narcissistic supply. And it's got nothing without you. It's like a light bulb. It's like a parasite. If you had a parasite in your digestive tract, what you don't do is send it love and take it to therapy. You take your medicine, get that thing flushed out. It's a parasite, it's in your head, it's in your body. Don't take it to therapy. That's the thing not to do with the narcissist. And this thing is a narcissist. So just cut off its power. It's a light bulb. It has no power without you dancing, performing for it, and trying to argue your way out of it. Just cut it off, and it's got nothing without you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that model. It makes so much sense. And there was one other thing you had mentioned at the beginning that I wanted to come back to was, and maybe I misunderstood, but part of what I've even recognized for myself is sometimes it can serve a purpose and motivate you at times. But what I've realized is if you don't rein it in or if you're not aware of it, it can actually consume your life and take over. So I remember, I'll just use a personal example, experiencing shame as a child for not doing enough or not being smart enough at times. And I really internalized that to then become achievement oriented. So it allowed me to do well in some aspects of my life. Again, it was unhealthy, but then it started to take over and I had to become fully aware of it. Is there some benefit to it without it consuming your life?
No, I don't believe so. I don't believe that it's ever useful. You don't need shame in order to achieve. If you're trying to achieve out of a sense of shame, you're trying to fill that empty hole. And that never works. It might make you feel better in the moment, but shame is an empty, it's like a bottomless pit. You try to, and this is why when
Yeah.
people tell you to sit in it, sit with your shame, feel your shame, I really feel like that's very bad advice. Yeah, you need to release your shame. But if you've been sitting with your shame, it's dangerous to tell someone to sit down with their shame because it's not like a normal emotion. Underneath the shame, you don't find grief or sadness, something, you find more shame. You find more shame. And if you sit with that, you find more shame. You get deeper and deeper into your shame. You do not need shame. This is the trance that we've all been under, that shame makes you better. Shame makes you achieve more. Shame makes you a better person. It's all total BS. This is the illusion. We do not need shame to do that. Shame does not make you better. It makes you worse. It makes you more defensive. It makes you more angry. It makes you toxic. Let's be real. It makes you toxic and you internalize that against yourself or you weaponize that against others. This is what shame does. Shame is always about control and it's never, shame makes you shrink. That's what shame does physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It makes you shrink. It doesn't make you become the best version of you whatsoever. Quite the opposite.
And I appreciate that. And then so if I was to, or if people in general, if they're wanting to become aware of, okay, where did this start or why is it there? If you're not sitting with it, how do you gain awareness? And is awareness even needed? from that perspective? Like, you shared your own experience too about often being scapegoated as a child by your mom. You were able to definitely gain some awareness there. Did that help you at least name it and know where it's coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an important step. But I'm not saying when I say don't sit with shame, I'm not saying don't release it. That's not what
Okay.
I'm saying. I'm saying don't sit with it and wallow in it. That's what people do. I know because I did it myself.
Yeah.
You sit down and you feel the shame, it takes over everything. It takes you over. Yeah, but you
Mhm,
could release it. But that
mhm,
requires non attachment. And that often requires some hand holding from people who've been wallowing in shame all their lives because they've been told that it makes you a good boy. And this is you even this is what we've all been taught about shame. And that's reinforced everywhere, even therapists. If you've done something bad, it's good that you feel shame. This is what people who've been trained by
mhm,
Western psychology believe. Even Brene Brown says that if you don't experience shame, that would make you a psychopath. And
mhm.
again, that's the idea that you need shame in order to be a good person, that you need shame to know that you've done something wrong to someone. You don't need shame for that. Shame is the opposite of accountability. And this is the thing when you're shamed, you don't take accountability, you go and hide. You don't take accountability, you don't change your behavior, you
Right.
shrink yourself and fight because
Mhm.
someone is attacking your identity.
Yes. Yeah.
So no, and shame is the opposite of authenticity. If you're carrying shame, you cannot be authentic. I should
Mhm,
know I've been carrying a lot of shame all my life, and I recognize now that I was never able to be authentic for that reason. Because shame tells you, hide, you're not good enough, shrink, don't let anyone see you, there's something wrong with you. So
mhm,
you can't be authentic when you've got that going on.
mhm.
Absolutely impossible. You can't take responsibility for your life if you've got shame going on. You
Yeah.
know, shame is the root cause of all of this.
Yes, and the other way I also see it show up is through people pleasing, right? If I can control other people's perception of me, then I don't have to feel this. But again, it's that bottomless pit, as you said. The other thing I wanted to explore with you too was, you talked about the role of religion when it comes to shame. And what I've been observing in the world lately, I think is what's lacking is a spiritual connection for people. That is why they're stuck in shame or they're doing the things they're doing. How do you, I guess, reconcile religion with spirituality? And what are your thoughts around the role of spirituality in navigating shame?
Jesus didn't teach shame.
Mm.
He didn't. He didn't use shame. That came from the church because shame is effective at controlling people. It is. It's effective. If I shame a little boy is pissing me off, is annoying me here, I shame him, he gets quiet very quickly. It's effective.
Yeah.
It's easy. It looks impressive. And this is why some therapists, some coaches use it because it looks impressive in the moment. And it's effective in the moment. So this is why it got weaponized. It's because it's effective. But no real spiritual teacher will use shaming. Jesus
Hmm.
didn't shame people. Never.
Hmm.
That came later. And if you do look at the Bible, the Old Testament God is very narcissistic, but Jesus never taught shame. This
Mm.
is all a human idea. Shame comes from humans. And if you look at the story of the Garden of Eden, you couldn't read that as an allegory of shame.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shame is the fall.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's perspective, right? I think I've definitely explored that story too, and there's a lot of meaning behind it, and you can look at it as punishment or you can look at it as an opportunity. But I think it's where your internal state is too, right? If you're looking at it from a perspective of shame, it's easy to internalize punishment versus opportunity.
We don't need shame in order to change our behavior or become better. Shame inhibits that, like I said
Correct.
before. But this is the idea that's pushed by society.
Yep.
It doesn't work. If we look at our prison system, it's very shaming. People go out, what do they do? First thing, they commit another crime. It doesn't rehabilitate people, it's shaming.
Mhm.
It encourages people to commit the same offenses or they come out worse. They come out worse criminals. So our whole system is built on this. And that doesn't mean that it's okay. That just means that it's a collective illusion that we're all under that nobody is talking about.
Mhm.
And that even therapists and everyone's talking from inside the shame cage. And this is normal. This is just the way it is. This is the way humans are. Not recognizing that shame is a weapon of it's a weapon of empire, basically.
Mhm.
It's always been a weaponization. It's a weapon of empire, and we don't have to take it. We've internalized the jailer, so nobody needs to be at our door telling us not to get too big for our boots and not to try to take over power. You need to be a narcissist to want to be a politician and so many things. Like it requires that level of look at me things. And our culture encourages narcissism and reveres narcissism. And that's God in the Bible is in a lot of the particularly the Old Testament is very narcissistic. So this is what we revere as human beings. We revere that strong, punishing leader, but that's not what spirituality is. And that's the distinction between this inner narcissist and this higher self, or whatever you want to call it, your
Yes.
guidance. When I've heard lots of spiritual leaders talking about this, how do you know one from the other? And they gave some very convoluted, complicated responses. But actually, the answer is very simple. Is this thing shaming you?
Mm.
If it's shaming you, that's not your higher wisdom. That's not your intuition. That's something else.
Yeah.
I call it the inner narcissist.
Yeah.
But that's not good for you.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
listening to
absolutely.
that is going to send you down the wrong road.
Yeah, yeah, and when I'm able to connect to that higher self, if we wanna call it that, I'm experiencing acceptance and love, not shame, and that's when I'm able
Exactly.
to
God
ground
doesn't
myself.
shame.
Yeah.
God doesn't shame. Whatever your religion, Allah, Buddha, these deities, they didn't shame people. That came later,
Mhm.
always. But shame is very useful for keeping people in line.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. No, I appreciate all of that, and what I'm hearing from you, and I think we both agree, is to find that spiritual connection to navigate some of the messaging. Not only are we giving to ourselves, but we're receiving in the world outside of ourselves. And I often remind myself and other people too, is when we're able to find that level of acceptance for ourselves outside of shame and have compassion, then we can extend compassion for how other people show up too, and recognize it's all a projection of their inner critic or inner narcissist, as you shared.
Yeah, and stop weaponizing shame against yourself. Recognize what I do, but like just the rest of today or tomorrow, whenever, go outside, have a look around, see how often you see people shaming each other, or how often you hear that voice shaming you or
Mhm,
shaming someone, even if it's not out loud. It's shame is everywhere.
mhm,
It's everywhere. It's like the currency for this collective insanity that we're in. Without shame, is we would be in paradise. We would be in such a better, maybe not paradise, but we would not be in this toxic genocidal world that we're currently living in.
mhm.
Shame is the driver and the root cause of all of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there'd be a lot more freedom for sure. As much as people want freedom, it sits with
Yeah,
them.
and shame is the opposite of freedom. If you're shaming yourself, you think it makes you better, you think it makes you more. It doesn't. It might work in the moment for 5 seconds or for this thing, but in medium to long term, for men and women, especially women, but men as well, it might look good in the moment, but it's always toxic. It's not going to help. It's not a good long term solution. But the problem is, in the moment, it looks good. You do the thing because you shamed yourself, but it's not the solution at all. It's
Mhm.
it's a very short term and toxic solution to
Yes.
something that needs a solution that isn't shame.
Mhm,
Shaming is never the answer. That's it. Like shame is never ever the answer. Don't care what the problem is. You shame people, they're gonna go in on themselves. They're not gonna. You tell people you can separate their behavior from who they are. That's the way forward.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate that. Emma, thank you so much for this conversation. Really appreciate your perspective and everything you're bringing to light. I agree with so much of the messaging you're sharing. Now, For listeners that want to learn more about you or your work, what are some ways they can do that?
Yeah, you can find me on Substack. I've written a lot of things on Substack, trauma matrix at substack.com. And yeah, I'm on all the social media platforms, Instagram and everywhere, trauma.matrix. So you can find me there, drop me a DM. And I also have a free gift if people are interested. So if you're listening to this and think, wow, I think I have a pretty severe inner critic. I have my free gift is called 5 Signs It's Time to Break Up with Your Inner Narcissist. So these are signs that this thing is really calling the shots on your life and really doing a number on your potential. So you can find that tinyurl.com/not today NARC, not today NARC. So you can check it out and download it there. And it gives you some solutions and ways to move forward and to really take back your power from this thing and to really reclaim your shameless and stop being shameable in your life. People can say anything to you and to just be like those girls with the ice cream. You won't take it in, you won't experience shame. And that's real freedom. That's
Yes,
the only freedom, really.
absolutely. Yeah, we will put all of that in the show note captions. But Emma, thank you again. Really appreciate your time today and the conversation.
Thank you very much.